February 1945. The paperwork declared a Nazi submarine lost near Morocco. Families mourned, and official records never questioned it. But half a world away, divers found a sunken submarine off New Jersey, where no German submarine was supposed to be. The evidence inside would unravel decades of certainty, expose how fragile wartime truths really are, and force us to ask, if history got this wrong, what else is left undiscovered, just beneath the surface? Wartime records are often treated as absolute, but the story of U-869 shows how quickly certainty can unravel. In the chaos of early 1945, naval assessors faced a flood of incomplete reports from convoys, scattered radio intercepts, and constant pressure to account for every missing vessel. When U-869 stopped transmitting after January 10th, German command tried to plot its path using the last known coordinates and a handful of assumptions. They marked its position near Gibraltar, reasoning that fuel constraints and previous orders meant the submarine must have turned south. No signals came back, but silence was common, because U-boats avoided radio to escape detection. In the absence of wreckage or survivor testimony, the paperwork filled in the blanks. Allied intelligence officers working from London and Washington relied on convoy escort action reports to piece together enemy losses. In February 1945, the destroyer escorts USS Howard D. Crowe and USS Coiner reported attacking a submerged contact off the American coast. Their sonar screens showed a target, depth charges and hedgehogs were fired, and a pair of underwater explosions followed. Yet without debris or an oil slick to confirm a kill, the incident was initially logged as inconclusive. Meanwhile, a separate anti-submarine action near Gibraltar fit the narrative of a missing U-boat, so the loss was chalked up to that event on paper. This kind of bureaucratic loop reinforced itself. German and American officials, each with gaps in their own data, copied and confirmed each other's reports. Post-war historians inherited these assumptions, entering the Morocco coordinates into official ledgers and memorial lists. For families, the paperwork became the only closure available: a date, a place, and a cause of death, all based on the best guesses of men who never saw the wreck. The role of paperwork in shaping memory is hard to overstate. The real position of U-869 remained locked beneath the Atlantic. That myth persisted for decades, unchallenged and unverified, until physical evidence forced a reckoning with the limits of wartime record-keeping and with the search for the truth. Steel and pressure defined the boundaries of U-869's world. Laid down at the Deschimag AG Weser shipyard in Bremen, this submarine belonged to the type Ein C-40 class, Germany's answer to the need for long-range patrols as the war's tides shifted. At nearly 252 feet in length, with a beam of just over 22 feet, the hull housed a labyrinth of machinery, torpedoes, and the cramped lives of up to 56 men. 6 torpedo tubes, 4 at the bow and 2 at the stern, gave it teeth, while a deck gun and anti-aircraft mounts offered surface defense. By 1944, surfacing meant risk. The type Ein C-40 carried enough diesel and provisions for months at sea, pushing the limits of endurance. On paper, its range stretched over 13,000 nautical miles at cruising speed, enough to cross the Atlantic and prowl the American coastline without resupply. Twin-man diesel engines drove the boat on the surface, switching to electric motors for silent running below. A single patrol could last 70 days or more, with the crew living among racks of torpedoes and the constant hum of machinery. Below decks, every inch was accounted for. Compartments were divided by watertight doors, with narrow passageways connecting the control room, radio shack, crew bunks, and the twin torpedo rooms. The pressure hull was built to withstand depths exceeding 750 feet, but even at 230 feet, the depth where U-869 would be found, the steel groaned under the weight of the Atlantic. Air was recycled, fresh water rationed, and noise discipline enforced. A single clatter could draw a destroyer's attention, and a moment's inattention could mean disaster. The Type INC-40's design reflected both ambition and desperation. Earlier, U-boats had been built for the North Atlantic, but by 1943, the war demanded reach. These boats hunted convoys from the Caribbean to the coast of West Africa, sometimes operating alone, sometimes in packs. U-869, launched in 1943 and commissioned in early 1944, entered service as the Allies tightened their grip on the sea. Orders changed quickly, routes shifted, and the line between hunter and hunted blurred. Inside, the boat was both weapon and home. Mess tables folded away to make room for bunks. Ration tins, medical kits, and personal keepsakes filled every available space. The machinery that powered the U-boat's long patrols also set the stage for its isolation. Far from port, with only the hum of motors and the distant echo of sonar pings, the crew depended on their vessel's endurance and stealth. The specifications that made a patrol off New Jersey possible would later help divers match the wreck's hidden features to the blueprints of a vanished ERA. A telegram from Naval Command could end a life, but it could not fill the empty space left at a family table. For the relatives of U-869's crew, there was no grave, no photograph of a headstone, no final letter. Just a line in a government record, often typed by someone who had never seen the sea. Mothers and fathers in Bremen or Hamburg waited for news that never arrived, clinging to rumors and hoping for a mistake in the lists. The war's last winter brought only silence. Some families received official notice that their sons were presumed lost near Morocco, thousands of miles from home. Others were told nothing at all. With no body to mourn and no wreck to visit, grief turned into a kind of waiting, endless, formless, and private. In Germany, the post-war years offered no answers. Memorial plaques listed the names of lost submariners, but the details were thin. For U-869, the location was a guess. The cause of death a matter of bureaucratic convenience. The sea was vast, and the Atlantic's secrets stayed hidden beneath the waves. Generations grew up with only stories and faded photographs. The fate of their relatives sealed in a confusion of wartime paperwork. The uncertainty left families with questions that could never be settled. Did they die quickly, or did they suffer? Were they remembered or forgotten with the rest of the lost boats? For the men aboard U-869, the submarine was both weapon and shelter. Their lives were measured in patrol orders and ration tins, in the cramped routine of life below the surface. Each man had a place in the tight hierarchy of the boat, from the captain to the youngest rating. They shared the same recycled air, the same hopes for survival, and the same fear of a sudden end. When the submarine disappeared from the record, their identities faded into numbers and coordinates. The families left behind had only these fragments to hold on to. The absence of a grave left wounds that official records could not heal. In the decades that followed, the story of U-869 was passed down in fragments. An uncle who never came home, a brother whose name was carved into a local memorial. For these families, closure was out of reach. The loss was not only personal, it was suspended in history, unresolved and unrecognized. The discovery of the wreck off New Jersey would not just rewrite a line in a naval ledger. It would offer, at last, a place where memory could settle, and where the silent questions of those left behind might find an answer. The Atlantic off New Jersey is no stranger to wrecks, but what the sonar picked up in 1991 did not match any charted disaster. Captain Bill Nagel and his crew aboard the Seeker had heard rumors from fishermen, stories about nets torn and tangled on something big, something metallic, 60 miles east of Point Pleasant. The Jersey seafloor was crowded with the remains of lost freighters and trawlers. Yet this anomaly stood out. The side-scan sonar returned a crisp, unmistakable outline, long, narrow, and unnaturally smooth. The image measured out at roughly 240 feet, far too sleek for a cargo ship, too intact for a barge. It was the signature of a submarine, one that according to every official record should not have been anywhere near these waters. The team's excitement was laced with disbelief. No known U-boat had ever been reported sunk off this stretch of coast. The closest match on any list was still 150 miles away. The coordinates, 39 degrees 34 minutes north, 73 degrees 2 minutes west, placed the wreck on the outer edge of the continental shelf, in water over 230 feet deep. For recreational divers, that was already beyond safe limits. For technical divers, it was a challenge that demanded planning, discipline, and the right mix of gases. One mistake could mean nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, or worse. But the pull of the unknown was stronger than the fear. John Chatterton and his fellow divers studied the sonar printouts. The hull's proportions fit the classic lines of a German Type 9, but corrosion and marine growth blurred the details. There were no visible deck guns or conning tower numbers, no obvious clues to the boat's identity. The only way to know for sure was to go down and see it firsthand. The team prepared their gear, double tanks, backup lights, reels of guideline, and reviewed their decompression schedules. The descent would be cold and dark, with currents that could shift in minutes. Every diver knew the risk, but no one wanted to turn back. On the surface, the Seeker's crew set anchor and watched as the first pair of divers slipped into the water. The line to the wreck vanished into the blue, trailing bubbles and anticipation. Each minute underwater would cost them precious reserves of air, and every second at depth would add to the decompression time needed on the way back up. The men dropped past layers of green and grey. The sunlight fading to black. At 230 feet, the beam of a dive light finally struck metal. The hull loomed out of the darkness, longer and more intact than anyone expected. Fishing nets draped the bow like a shroud. The conning tower was still in place, though the numbers were hidden beneath decades of rust and silt. No one spoke. In the silence of the deep, the divers circled the wreck, searching for anything that would explain its presence. Every detail was a clue. A hatch welded shut, a periscope bent by the pressure, the faint outline of a swastika just visible beneath the algae. The realization set in. This was a German submarine, far from any official lost site, preserved in the cold Atlantic as if waiting for someone to find it. The questions multiplied as the divers surfaced, their voices shaking with adrenaline. What was this boat doing here? How had it ended up on the Jersey seafloor, unrecorded and forgotten? The only certainty was that the story in the history books was about to be rewritten. At 230 feet beneath the Atlantic, the world closes in fast. The light fades, the water presses in from all sides, and every minute spent on the bottom comes at a cost. Technical diving at this depth is a calculated gamble, one that demands discipline and preparation long before anyone ever touches the water. The divers who set out to investigate the wreck off New Jersey faced a gauntlet of hazards, each one invisible until it was too late to turn back. The first challenge comes with the descent itself. Cold currents sweep across the Jersey seafloor, shifting direction without warning. Even a slight miscalculation can push a diver off the wreck, forcing a dangerous swim in near blackness to find the anchor line again. The water temperature hovers just above freezing, numbing fingers and slowing reaction times. Visibility can drop to 0 in seconds, especially when a stray fin kick stirs up the silt. Every diver carries redundant lights and reels of guideline, knowing that a single equipment failure could mean losing the way out. Fishing nets pose a threat that cannot be ignored. Decades of commercial trawling have left the wreck draped in strands of monofilament and heavy cable. Nets snag on the conning tower, wrap around the bow, and hang in the water like invisible traps. One wrong move and a diver can find themselves entangled, their air dwindling as they struggle to cut free. The team learn to move slowly, checking every handhold and keeping knives within easy reach. The risk of entrapment is constant. A moment's inattention can end a life. The physiological dangers are just as real. At 230 feet, ordinary air becomes a liability. The increased pressure turns nitrogen into a narcotic, clouding judgment and slowing reflexes, a condition known as nitrogen narcosis. Oxygen too becomes dangerous at high concentrations, threatening seizures if not carefully managed. To survive, the divers use custom blends of helium, oxygen, and nitrogen, called trimix, that reduce the risks but require precise planning. Each diver carries not only a main tank, but also multiple stage bottles for the long ascent. The mathematics of gas management are unforgiving. A single miscalculation can leave a diver without enough to get home. Decompression is the final, inescapable hurdle. The human body absorbs inert gases under pressure, and rising too quickly causes these gases to form deadly bubbles in the bloodstream, a condition known as decompression sickness, or the bends. To avoid this, divers must stop at intervals on the way up, sometimes pausing for more than an hour in the cold, exposed to currents and swells. Every extra minute spent at depth adds time to the decompression schedule, turning a short exploration into an ordeal that stretches into the afternoon. The surface may be just 100 feet away, but it might as well be another world. Inside the wreck, the dangers only multiply. The structure is warped and sealed in places, with narrow hatches and collapsed bulkheads blocking the way. Silt clouds at the slightest touch, reducing visibility to nothing. Divers must memorize the layout, mark their path with reels, and resist the urge to push deeper than planned. The pressure hull, designed to keep water out, now traps the unwary. In these tight spaces, even the smallest mistake, a snagged hose, a dropped light, a moment of panic, can be fatal. The dive team's discipline is what kept them alive. Every mission began with a detailed briefing. Every diver assigned a role and a plan. They checked and rechecked equipment, rehearsed emergency procedures, and trusted each other with their lives. The stakes were clear. No artifact, no photograph, no clue was worth a human life. The need for caution shaped every decision, slowing the pace of discovery, but ensuring that each return to the surface was a victory in itself. The proof they sought would have to wait for those willing to face the Atlantic's cold, silent judgment and survive. Inside the wreck, the divers faced a puzzle that could only be solved by careful measurement and observation. The first clues came from the shape and sequence of the compartments. They moved through a narrow corridor, barely 2 feet wide, flanked by pressure doors and equipment racks that matched the blueprints of a Type 1X C-40 U-boat. The control room sat amidships, dense with levers, dials, and the ghostly remains of electrical panels. Just forward, the torpedo room revealed racks for 4 tubes, stacked in the same order as German plans from the 1940s. Aft, past the galley and a tiny mess area, the machinery spaces echoed with the memory of twin diesel engines, now silent but unmistakably arranged in parallel as the technical manuals described. Every measurement was checked against known schematics. The hull's beam, just over 22 feet, fit the specifications for the class. The total length measured by guideline and flashlight came in at approximately 252 feet from bow to stern. Even the placement of the periscope well and the radio shack, tucked behind the control room, matched the layout drawn in wartime shipyard diagrams. Divers noted the sequence of watertight doors, the location of the galley on the port side, and the cramped bunks stacked 3 high in the crew quarters. These details were too precise for coincidence. The interior evidence went beyond basic structure. Gauges labeled in German, with metric calibrations, lined the instrument panels. The torpedo loading mechanisms bore serial numbers in a style unique to German wartime production. Storage lockers still held ration tins stamped with dates from 1944. Even the piping for the compressed air system followed the same route as in museum U-boats, snaking overhead and branching toward the ballast tanks. The team documented each feature, comparing photographs and sketches to archival plans preserved in naval archives. Every match brought them closer to confirmation, but not every clue came easily. Decades of corrosion and silt masked some of the finer details. Marine growth obscured hull numbers, and erased paint from bulkheads. In some compartments, collapsed decking forced the divers to crawl, feeling for familiar shapes in the darkness. They worked slowly, marking their route with reels and noting every distinctive feature. The distinctive curve of the conning tower, the arrangement of the escape hatches, the position of the galley stove. Each confirmed element narrowed the list of possible identities. The process was methodical, almost forensic. The dive team treated the wreck like a crime scene, recording measurements and searching for features unique to the Type 1XC40 design. The more they uncovered, the clearer the picture became. This was not a generic submarine or a lost Allied boat. The layout, the equipment, and the sequence of compartments all pointed to a late-war German U-boat. What they still needed was a personal artifact, something with a name or number that could tie this steel tomb to a specific crew. That final piece of evidence would come soon. For now, the structure itself told a story that no wartime report could erase. A single object, half buried in silt and corrosion, changed everything. During one of the most dangerous penetrations into the wreck, a diver's light caught the glint of a blade wedged beneath collapsed bunks. The knife was ordinary in shape, but its handle bore a name: Horenberg. The letters were still sharp, untouched by decades of salt water. It was the kind of personal artifact that war rarely leaves behind. A crewman's possession, not standard issue gear. The name matched only one man lost at sea in 1945. Horst Horenberg, machinist's mate, assigned to U-869. The discovery sent a jolt through the dive team. Until then, every clue had been circumstantial. German language dials, metric gauges, the unmistakable layout of a Type 1XC40. These were features shared by dozens of U-boats. The knife was different. It was a signature, something that could only belong to this crew on this boat. The divers surfaced, adrenaline still surging, and began the painstaking work of cross-referencing the name against wartime archives. Naval records listed Horst Horenberg as missing, presumed dead, after the disappearance of U-869. His family, like so many others, had received only a notice of loss and a date. There was no grave, no confirmation, just a line in a ledger and the official story: sunk near Morocco, far from American shores. But the knife in the Atlantic wreck did not care about paperwork. It was proof that at least one member of U-869's crew had made it to the Jersey coast, and that the submarine lying in 230 feet of water could not be dismissed as a case of mistaken identity. The team's research intensified. They checked every available crew list, scoured German naval personnel files, and contacted historians who specialized in U-boat operations. No other U-boat on record had carried a Horenberg. The odds of such a knife ending up in a different wreck by chance or by error were impossibly small. The artifact forced a confrontation with decades of official certainty. The records that had placed U-869 near Gibraltar now looked less like fact and more like institutional guesswork. The Atlantic had kept its secret, but the steel hull and a single engraved knife had begun to tell the truth. For the divers, the moment was electric. Theories and speculation faded, replaced by the reality of a name found in the dark. The knife was more than a clue. It was a challenge to every assumption that had gone untested for 50 years. With the Horenberg blade in hand, the search for final confirmation surged forward. All that remained was to find the one piece of evidence that would erase any doubt and force the world's navies to rewrite their history. Confirmation came not with a flourish, but with a number pressed into plastic. Deep inside the wreck, a diver's gloved hand brushed against a small, corroded tag wired to the machinery of the electric motor room. The inscription was clear enough to read, U869. After years of speculation and risk, the debate was over. The artifact matched the U-boat's registry, a serial number cross-checked against German naval archives, and the original shipyard records from Bremen. No other boat carried this designation. The tag was a silent witness, sealed away since 1945, waiting for someone to find it. Forensic work that followed was as meticulous as any criminal investigation. Photos of the tag, along with measurements and sketches, were sent to archivists and historians on both sides of the Atlantic. Official lists were pulled from dusty files. Registry entries compared line by line. The sequence of digits, the typeface, even the way the tag was mounted, all matched the standards used by Deschimag A.G. Weser during the war. There was no room left for doubt or rival theories. The mystery submarine off New Jersey was U869. Official records changed. US Navy and Coast Guard records, which had credited the loss to a battle near Gibraltar, were amended to reflect the physical evidence. Memorials and databases updated their entries, shifting the coordinates from the Mediterranean to the cold waters off New Jersey. For the families of the crew, the correction offered a kind of closure. It was an answer that paperwork alone had never provided. The Atlantic, long accused of swallowing the truth, had finally given up proof that no desk-bound historian could ignore. Naval analysts have spent years scrutinizing the wreck of U869, searching for answers in twisted steel and ruptured compartments. Two theories stand at odds, each backed by its own set of evidence and advocates. The official record credits the destroyer escorts USS Howard D. Crowe and USS Coiner with the kill. Their action reports from February 11, 1945 describe a sonar contact, a barrage of hedgehog projectiles and depth charges, and the telltale signs of destruction. Underwater explosions, a slick of oil, and debris rising to the surface. US Coast Guard assessments, updated after the wreck's discovery, matched the timeline and location, and pointed to the convoy defense action as the fatal blow. But the divers who mapped the wreck noticed something that did not quite fit. The most severe damage appeared forward, concentrated around the torpedo room and control center. Hull breaches suggested a violent internal blast, not the pitted scars of external depth charges. Some experts proposed a different scenario, a torpedo that ran in a circle, a rare but deadly malfunction that could send a weapon looping back toward its own submarine. The type XC-40 had advanced acoustic torpedoes designed to home in on enemy propellers, and they had a history of erratic runs. If one circled back and struck U869, it might explain the pattern of destruction, an explosion from within, sudden and catastrophic, before the American ships ever closed in. Both sides present compelling arguments. The Coast Guard points to dual damage zones, consistent with a patterned depth charge attack, and the precise match between the action reports of the Crow and the Coiner and the wreck's position. The divers counter with the absence of classic external blast marks and the single devastating breach in the forward compartments. Decades later, the debate remains unresolved. Two narratives are locked in a forensic duel, each shaped by incomplete evidence and the cold, silent testimony of the wreck itself. Inside the pressure hull, the Atlantic's cold has preserved a world left behind. Crew bunks still line the walls, stacked 3 high, each with its own faded blanket, and the outline of a pillow pressed flat by decades of water and silt. Metal utensils rest on the mess table, some still beside dented ration tins stamped with German dates from 1944. A coffee mug, chipped but unbroken, sits where a hand last set it down. The narrow galley shelves hold plates and cutlery, all marked with the eagle and swastika of the Kriegsmarine. In the control room, a pair of boots lies beneath the bench, toes pointed toward the hatch, as if waiting for their owner to return. Ration containers, medical kit, and writing pencils remain tucked into lockers, protected by the same watertight doors that once sealed the crew from the ocean. These objects have not drifted far from where they were used. The air is gone, but the order of daily life remains. A logbook open to a half-finished page, a shaving kit beside the sink, a comb tangled with a single strand of hair. The Atlantic's chill has slowed corrosion, preserving a moment in 1945, as if time itself had paused. Each artifact is more than a relic. They are the last traces of men who vanished without a grave, their lives suspended in this steel tomb. The wreck is now protected as a war grave, a place where memory and loss are held in the silence. For the families who waited decades for answers, these preserved fragments offer a kind of peace, a reminder that even in the deep, ordinary life endures longer than official records or wartime myths. History's errors do not vanish. They wait to be uncovered. Every time divers rewrite a record, they remind us that truth is not fixed by paperwork, but by evidence and persistence. Today, the ocean still hides untold stories. Official reports remain vulnerable to human mistake. The next anomaly on a sonar screen could upend another certainty. What else lies just beneath the surface? Share your thoughts below, and thanks for diving deep with us.